ever get that feeling? Like something huge GE is going on, but you just can't put your finger on it. Like the air is buzzing, but you don't know why. Well, get this. It might be space weather messing with you. Today, we are diving deep, deep, deep into how things happening on the sun, things like solar flares, cosmic rays, you name it, could be influencing your health in ways you'd never expect. We're talking heart rate, blood pressure, even traffic accidents, and get this, the scientists were looking at data from all over the globe. So, to kick things off, can you give us a quick rundown of what space weather actually is and what kind of effects were these studies looking at?
Absolutely. Think of space weather as the sun's way of throwing a cosmic party.
Right.
Sometimes it's a chill gathering, and sometimes things get a little wild. So you've got your solar flares. Those are like sudden bursts of energy from the sun's surface, right? And then there are cosmic rays. These are high-energy particles that are zipping through space, some of them coming from the sun. And then when the sun really throws a tantrum, its magnetic field can go a little haywire, causing these things called geomagnetic storms, which can actually disrupt things here on Earth, satellites, power grids, you name it.
Okay, so those are the party favors. But what about the effects on us? The studies looked at a bunch of different things,
Right.
right?
We're talking direct and indirect indicators. Direct indicators are things we can actually measure in your body, like heart rate, blood pressure, even brain waves. And then you have your indirect indicators, like traffic accidents or hospital admissions. Those are things that might be influenced by changes in our bodies, even if we don't realize it at the time.
Okay, so my chance of getting a speeding ticket goes up because the sun is acting up. That's wild. But seriously, what kind of specific effects did these studies find?
Well, one study in Azerbaijan actually had people hooked up to heart monitors while they tracked solar activity and cosmic rays. And what they found is that during intense events, things like geomagnetic storms or sudden drops in cosmic ray intensity, people's heart rates tended to go up.
Wow, so it's like our bodies are picking up on these cosmic shifts and reacting even if our conscious minds have no idea.
Exactly. And it wasn't just heart rate either. Another study, this one in Slovakia, looked at a group of aviators, and they found that their blood pressure seemed to be affected by both geomagnetic activity and fluctuations in those cosmic rays.
That makes sense. Aviators are literally closer to it all up there. But does that mean that where you live plays a role in how much space weather affects you?
It's possible. But geography isn't the only factor. What's really interesting is that everyone seems to react differently. And there's even some evidence that gender might play a role, with some studies suggesting that women might be more sensitive to space weather shifts than men.
That's fascinating. So we've got our heart rates and blood pressure possibly being affected. What else are we looking at here? The research also mentioned something about arrhythmias, right? That sounds pretty intense.
It is. This is where the sun's magnetic field comes in. And things get really, really interesting. You see, every 11 years or so, the sun's magnetic field completely flips. It's like taking a bar magnet and suddenly switching the north and south poles, you
Oh,
know?
okay. I can only imagine the kind of energy that takes, but how does that tie into arrhythmias?
Well, researchers were looking at different types of arrhythmias, things like premature ventricular contractions, atrial fibrillation, that sort of thing. And what they found is that the correlation between these arrhythmias and solar events actually seemed to change direction depending on whether the sun's magnetic field was in its positive or negative phase.
Hold on. Are you saying that this massive magnetic flip, millions of miles away, could actually be influencing the delicate rhythms of the human heart? I mean, how could that even work?
It's still a bit of a mystery, to be honest, but there are a few theories floating around out there. Some scientists believe that the electromagnetic fields that are generated by these solar events could actually be, like, interacting with the electrical activity of the heart.
Interesting.
Others think there might be a link to the way our bodies produce hormones, things like melatonin, which is influenced by light and darkness.
Hmm.
Melatonin, that plays a big role in regulating our internal clocks.
Okay, so maybe the sun is messing with our internal timekeepers, and that's throwing off our heart rhythms, like a cosmic jet lag situation.
Exactly. And remember how I mentioned that everyone reacts differently to all this? Well, our bodies are these incredibly complex systems. All sorts of factors, from our genetics to our lifestyle, could play a role in how sensitive we are to these really subtle shifts in the Earth's electromagnetic environment.
This is blowing my mind. Before this deep dive, I probably would have dismissed this as pure science fiction. But the more we talk about it, the more I realize just how connected we are to the cosmos.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the sun either. Remember those cosmic rays we talked about? They're coming from all over the galaxy, and some scientists believe they might have a role to play in human health as well.
Okay, now I really want to know more about those cosmic rays. So these cosmic rays, they're like what? tiny little space travelers zipping across the galaxy, maybe carrying information from like distant stars and galaxies. What kind of information could they be sharing with our bodies?
It's a fascinating question. Some researchers think cosmic rays might actually play a role in our evolution. See, cosmic rays can cause mutations. These are essentially changes in our DNA.
Mm.
Most of the time, these mutations are nothing major. They're harmless. Our cells even repair some. But every once in a while, you get a mutation that actually gives an organism a survival advantage. So think about that over vast stretches of time. These tiny, tiny changes can really add up and, could actually influence the whole course of evolution.
Wow. So you're saying these tiny particles raining down on us from space could have played a role in shaping life as we know it. It's like we're all connected to the cosmos on this really fundamental level.
It really is a humbling thought, isn't it? But it gets even more interesting. There's actually research looking at even broader health impacts from space weather. We're not just talking about our hearts and minds here. Scientists have been investigating possible connections between solar activity and things like stroke incidents, mental health, even get the spread of infectious diseases.
Hold on. Are you telling me that the sun could be playing a role in things like pandemics? Seriously, that's a whole other level of mind-blowing.
It's still early days. There's a lot more research that needs to be done for sure. But some studies have actually found correlations between solar activity cycles. Remember that 11-year cycle we talked about?
Hmm.
Well, they found correlations between those cycles and the timing of things like flu outbreaks. One theory is that these changes in solar activity might actually influence the way viruses mutate and spread.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us? Should we all be investing in tinfoil hats and underground bunkers to, shield ourselves from the sun's mood swings?
Maybe not quite, but I think this research really highlights how deeply interconnected we are with the cosmos. It's a reminder that what happens in space doesn't stay in space, right?
It definitely makes you look at the night sky with a whole new perspective. It's not just a pretty backdrop anymore. It's this dynamic force that's actually shaping our lives in ways we never even imagined.
Absolutely. And I think as we learn more about space weather and how it affects us, we might actually be able to develop ways to mitigate the negative impacts and maybe even harness some of the benefits. Like, imagine being able to predict and prepare for things like geomagnetic storms that could disrupt our power grids. That's the kind of knowledge that could have a really significant impact on our lives.
So to wrap things up, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this deep dive, it's that we're part of something much, much larger than ourselves. And while we may not have all the answers yet, I think understanding these subtle ways that space weather influences our world, our bodies even, is a really crucial step in unraveling those mysteries.
Well said. I just add that it's a good reminder to pay attention to what's happening up there in the sky above us. You never know what you might discover.
Okay, folks, you heard it here. Next time you step outside, take a moment to appreciate the sun and all those unseen forces at play. And hey, maybe check the space weather forecast while you're at it. It's a whole lot more than sunshine and rainbows up there.